Hello, this is Roland. Today I'd like to read something to you from The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis, the most widely read devotional book of all time. Listen to this. By two wings is man lifted above earthly things, even by simplicity and purity. Simplicity ought to be in the intention, purity in the affection. Simplicity reacheth towards God. Purity apprehendeth him and tasteth him. No good action will be distasteful to thee if thou be free within from inordinate affection. Well, let me stop at that point right there. Let me reread the beginning one more time. It's beautiful. By two wings is man lifted above earthly things, even by simplicity and purity. You see, Christ said we should be in the world but not of the world. In the world but not of the world. What I was explaining in the last video that I made was that every reaction, that if you are emotional, it is proof that you are hypnotized. And it is proof, as a very wise man said, that you have not found God. To the extent that you find God, to that extent are you not emotional. Emotion is a response to outside tease, temptation, challenge, stimulus. Okay. Now, what is it that we are told to do? We're told to lean upon God. In the Bible it said, lean not upon your own intellect. I forget how it says it. Your own intelligence, but lean upon God. In the New Testament it said, don't worry about anything, but with all things call upon God. And we're told to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and will, and our neighbor as ourselves. Now think about it. So how do we rise above? It says, by simplicity and purity is man lifted above earthly things. Well, that's how we want to be, in the world but not of the world. Because as soon as you react, you fall. See? As soon as you react, you fall. When you become angry, irritable, nervous, tense, impatient, hurt, feelings, resentful, unhappy, bitter, excited, lusting, wanting, see, hungry, greedy. See? You can sense that you're diminished, can't you? A lot of times when you react emotionally. We all know that. We all know that we admire the calm airline pilot who comes on the intercom and says, "We're now flying at 30,000 feet. We expect a little turbulence over the continental divide, and we'll be ready for that." Something like that. I don't know how to say it, but very calm. We like that. We don't want an airline pilot that's falling apart at the seams and all nervous and anxious and worried. We sense there's a certain superiority in being calm. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to gaze upon God. You have to look to Him. See, if you look to other people, see, by now you know that there's no, by now, if you're older, if you're not, if you're 30, 40, 50, you know that there's really no love in the world, don't you? Sure, you say how you doing, and they say how you doing, and you can give them a present, and they give you a present, but ultimately, see, life boils down to a few relationships. Your family, your partner, a few. But even there, you don't want to be too close. If parents know that when the child is needy and clingy, something's wrong. When people are codependent, there's something wrong. See, there has to be some freedom. See, the parent knows that you can't be a good parent if you try to be the child's friend. We know that, don't you? You can't be the child's friend. You can't give in to to be nice. If you give in to be nice, to be popular, how many fathers make that mistake? You giving in, to be popular, to be liked. You're not doing them any good, are you? So you know that there's a certain little bit of standoffishness. You don't want to be too close, because then you end up hurting them. And you get hurt too. How many of you know that when you get too close, when you want something? Now how about somebody that wants something from you? They want something from you. What do? You feel like running. They're too needy. There's something wrong. See? Well, when you haven't found God, then you one thing that we need, not talking about people right now, but just talking about our psychic life. One thing we need then is excitement for a feeling of life. See, life comes from God. Life comes from God. All good comes from God. See, in Him we live and move and have our being. But when you haven't found Him, when you're separate, when you've become separate from Him, how do you become separate from God? You were close to Him when you were a little child. By becoming emotional. When somebody upset you. When somebody teased you. When somebody was mean to you. When they rejected you. When they emotionalized you. See? It's emotion that separates you. But then once you're separated, that emotion is the response to what separated you. And then you begin to develop a relationship, a bond with that which separated you. See, then you feel this slavery, as enslavement. So now getting back to what I was saying. So then, if you were a bit distant, you're like Rudyard Kipling's beautiful poem, If. You know, if you can remain calm when everybody else around you is losing their head. See, remember all those different stanzas, and then finally he said, then you'll be a man, my son. You'll be a man. Well, you have to be in the world, but not of the world. Sure, you're friendly. You do business with people. You're there with your family. And you have some good times, some happiness. But not too much. See? All right, so now we said that then you have to look to God, gaze to God. And when your relationship is right with God, then it'll be right with other people. When you're closer to Him, when you look to Him, when you get your support from Him, then you don't need other people. See? Then you can be a good parent, a good partner, a good friend, because you don't need them. See? So, by two wings is man lifted above earthly things. And of course, this is old writing here. When it says man, it means person. By two wings is a person lifted above earthly things. Even by simplicity and purity. So simplicity is realizing, what does it say in the Bible? Be still and know that God is God. And you're not God. So you know that God exists. And you know that He's there. And you look to Him. That's simplicity. Excuse me, what did Christ say? Someone in the Bible, was it Paul or James? I don't remember. Peter, Christ, said the double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. You don't want to be double-minded. You want to have simple, clear vision. So you look to God. Okay? You look to God. And so how does that translate into the moment? Well, you first thing in the morning, and then again you refresh it during the day, but first thing in the morning you meditate for 5 minutes or so to reestablish the connection with your intuition. See, the language of God is intuition. I heard a very, very wise and spiritual man say that a couple of days ago. I'd like to make a little video lecture about that. The language of God is intuition. Language of God is intuition. So you need to recontact your intuition. with the meditation, like the little meditation that I have. Not getting lost in imagination, not thinking rosy thoughts, not chanting or humming or, lost in language, not lost in imagination, but standing back a little bit and, a little closer to God, recollecting yourself, as the mystics said, the Christian mystics, like Teresa of Avila, Miguel Molinos, St. John of the Cross, Brother Lawrence, Thomas of Kempis, and others, Ignatius of Loyola. Recollect yourself, take a step back, okay? So now you are taking a step back. Maybe we use the analogy, upon two wings is man lifted above earthly things. Well, one of them is simplicity, standing back in God's light, okay? So that's one. And then the other, let's see, how can I had such a beautiful thought, and then I've lost it somehow. The meditation lifts you, that's it, the meditation lifts you above. It says above earthly things. The meditation literally lifts you a little bit above by standing back. Okay? You're no longer lost in the thoughts. You're not lost in the emotions. Now you're standing back a little bit, observing thought, observing emotion, see? So you're lifted above. It's like rising up from the depths of the ocean up to the surface, and then you break through the surface. There's a beautiful sky, puffy clouds, and you take a breath of fresh air. You're no longer lost down there in those nightmares and daymares and worries and doubts and fears. You see what I mean? You're above them. You're not trying to suppress them. You're not trying to blank the mind. You're just standing a little bit above them, observing them, that's all. So that's the meditation. And purity. So the simplicity becomes purity. Simplicity is the intention. Purity, the affection. This is very good. In everything, there's something of truth and love. Truth and love. Emanuel Swedenborg wrote about that. There's everything corresponds to truth and love. So a good example is sunlight. Sunlight has both light and warmth. See, light and warmth. And the light corresponds with truth, and the warmth with love. See, truth and love. Light and warmth. See how that works? So here, Thomas of Kempis is saying simplicity and purity. So simplicity is the truth part of it, the thought part of it, the intention part of it. And purity is the love part of it. So you see how simple it is? Simple. Simplicity and purity. See, your mind is not pure. Why? Because you're a terrible person? No, that's not the reason. Because it's corrupted. See, when you react, you couldn't help yourself when you were a little child. Your parents were supposed to be calm. See, they were supposed to bear witness to calmness and patience and understanding and wisdom. But instead, they themselves were reactive. They themselves were needy. They had issues. See, and they dumped on you. And they passed on to you what had happened to them. So you reacted to them, to the injustice of your dad not being there for you, or your mom yelling at you, or teachers being bossy and mean, and so on and so forth. You reacted. But every time you react, you form an imprint, an image, a memory, an engram forms in your mind. Okay? Not to mention that you become a little bit subject to it. Your mind becomes a little bit subject to it, and your body too. See, if somebody upset you when you were a little child, and then later on, years later, you see somebody that acts and talks just like the person that upset you, you'll notice maybe your heart is beating a little bit, or you'll notice you're getting a little bit upset or anxious around them. Your body is subject to that kind of person because you were emotionalized in the first place. Well, like I said, you were just a little child, but now you're an adult. So now you have to learn to reverse the process. Because all your life, what you've done then is after you became upset, finally you threw in the towel, and you just went with it. You yielded. And then excused your yielding, or you struggled against it, and then eventually you became tired, fatigued, you gave up, threw in the towel, and yielded anyway. And then after you yielded to the pressure, to the stimulus, to the temptation, to the tease, to the challenge, after you yielded to it, then what? Well, maybe you felt resentful. Somebody comes along at the office and says, oh, would you do this for me? And you say, okay, but it's not your job and you don't have time. And then afterwards, what? You're resentful. See? Well, then what? Then the resentment makes you feel guilty. So then you do it anyway and do even more than they asked to try to assuage the guilt. See? But the other thing you do is lose awareness. See, it's painful to see yourself constantly yielding, to see your enslavement to the world. And then you became enslaved to pleasures, too. It became a pain to be subject to all these wrong authorities and to all these things that made you react. It became a pain and a tension. And so you looked for something that's for pleasure. See? But then you began to respond to the pleasure objects. See, the wrong authorities, the impatient authorities. See? The loveless authorities, the misguided authorities, they got you started reacting in the first place with upset and anger and crying and all that sort of thing, see? But then you felt empty inside, and then you looked for pleasure. But then the pleasure objects made you respond, see? So then you became enslaved to your food, to your drugs, to your alcohol, to your music, to whatever it is that you used. You became enslaved to it. See? You see how that works? And dependent on it. You look to it to take away the tension, to take away the pain. And you became dependent and enslaved to people, too. You had to serve them so they wouldn't upset you. See? So you appeased bullies, and then you became addicted to pleasure. Isn't that the story of everyone's life? Well, they have to reverse that. You have to start looking to God. See? And your new life begins in stillness. Be still and know that I am God. God said in the song, be still and know that I am God. Well, be still. So your new life begins in the stillness. And then you move, and then your life develops as motion and rest. Motion and rest. But it's a motion and rest depending upon God and upon what's good for you. See, He knows what's good for you. And it's purposeful. Whereas the only life you know now is the life that starts with stimulus, tease, challenge. See? And you react. So so reacting to tease or challenge, having to bring up animal emotion, and then being tired, fatigued. See? And there's a sense of futility eventually that comes with it because it's not your life. It's a life dependent upon all these tease and challenge, or trying to escape from tease and challenge, or appeasing people so they won't tease you, and all that kind of thing. Okay? So there was more I wanted to read to you. There's more beautiful stuff coming right after this, but I'll just keep it very simple. That's the theme of today's program. By two wings is a person lifted above earthly things, even by simplicity and purity. Simplicity ought to be in the intention, purity in the affection.